So this is a little bit of bonus stuff for my book. I'm sat with Romesh Ranganathan, and people that are watching it can see that. Rom, you already got the giggles. That's great.
No, it's just 'cause it's bonus stuff the way you delivered that. I liked it.
Good, I'm pleased. I would say that you are the most celebrated comedian of my generation of stand-up.
Oh my God.
No, I think so. You've won like countless awards, including a BAFTA. You're one of the very few stand-ups that can sell out arenas and sell tickets globally, all over the world, in case people don't know what globally means.
Yeah.
That's before we get into
Globally
sitcom.
and all around the world.
Yeah, both. Yeah. So that's impressive.
Yeah. God, you know what? As you say it, I am a pretty big deal.
You are.
Yeah.
And that's before you get into sitcoms, presenting and having one of the best slots on Radio 2. And on top of all that, you're one of my best friends.
Yeah, true.
So
I need to change one of those things. I think it may be the last one.
But people might be quite surprised to hear that the question that I wanted to ask you was about career highs and lows. For the chapter, was Miley Cyrus right? When it comes to your career, is it all about the climb? First off, would you consider yourself an anxious person?
Yes. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons that we're good friends, is that we both share that. But yeah, I am. I would say that I've got much better at managing it now, but only because I've made that one of my priorities to deal with it. Because like, the truth is, I got to a point where, like, on the face of it, I should be okay, you know, mentally, but I was still feeling like super anxious about everything, and I wasn't enjoying it. And I remember thinking, these are like, I'm getting things that, you know, if you'd have said to me I was a full-time comedian, I'd be like, that's incredible. And then I got that, and then I was still really anxious, and I was like, well, that means that nothing external can change. Do you know what I mean? Like, I had, you know, I've got a wonderful wife, got wonderful children, and I've got this career that like that's gone far beyond anything I could have dreamt of. I definitely could have dreamt it, but like, you know, in terms of like I was expecting, and so why am I still feeling anxious? So that made me realise that I've got to sort something else out. You know, I realised that external things were not going to solve that.
And was it about getting on stage and being the sort of Romesh that people know from the telly? Was that where the anxiety was coming from, or was it just about sort of day to day?
I think it's. I think I'm just, as many people are, just hardwired with imposter syndrome and like self-doubt. You know, having very low self-opinion, and so when you have that so deeply kind of stitched into your core, external things don't really touch the sides. You know, it doesn't matter what happens; you can't change that self-opinion. And then it ends up being like, you know, without getting too, I don't want to ruin your audio, but with getting too like heavy. But like the truth is that you get really, basically it becomes confirmation bias, and so you ignore all the positive things, and anything that you construe to be negative you really cling on to. You know, it's that whole thing of like, you know, the comedian's cliche of like, you could be ripping a gig but you see one person who looks like they're not enjoying it, and that's all you can think about.
You can look at.
Yeah, and I think you and I have this in common. I feel like we do that in life, or you know, or we can fall into the trap of doing that in life. And so I realised I had to kind of tackle that. And
was that linked in any way to feeling like you belonged in comedy, like looking for that person or looking for that sort of confirmation bias? Because I know, and you know, we've talked about this when we're not recording it, but like there were periods where I was like up at the Edinburgh Festival and I did not feel like, you know, not privately educated, I'm not middle class, I'm not a guy. Like there were lots of things that made me feel like,
these are all the things that distance me from you as well, actually. These are all barriers I had to overcome.
What, you thought if she was privately educated, we'd get on better?
I just thought, do you know what I mean?
She was smarter.
Yeah, I just thought, so step it up a bit, man. I'm having to ignore a lot of stuff here to be mates with you. No, I get what you're saying. Like, the truth is, I don't feel part of the comedy community. I don't feel part of the comedy community. I don't really. I've got friends who work in comedy who, you know, as you said, you're one of my very best friends, but I think we'd be friends regardless. Do you know what I mean? If life brought us together, we'd be friends regardless. But I don't consider myself to be part of the comedy community. I think that I'm not in a clique or anything. I don't really feel like I'm in a clique or anything like that. I think the thing that is the thing that helped me realise, it's something that you worry about. And I know you've worried about it in the past, and I don't know how much you worry about it now. But I think it's just sort of, it's being all right with that. I no longer consider myself to be a comedian. I'm somebody that does comedy. And I think like a lot less of my identity is tied up with what I do for a job. I don't care about being part of the comedy community. Not in a I throw it away, as in like I just go and do my job, and I really love doing my job, and I hang out with the people I love hanging out with, and I work with the people that I love working with. But I don't feel the need anymore to be part of a group or anything. I just don't have that desire anymore.
Was there a period where your identity really was tied up with being a comedian? Because obviously when we met, I think you were still teaching maths. Mm-hmm. And so...
Badly.
I imagine so.
Yeah. I wasn't an insider in the teaching community either. I can say that for nothing.
But I remember when it was our dream for both of us, for our identities, to be comedians.
Yeah.
And what I'm really interested in is being someone who does have some anxiety. How did you find the courage to go from having a job, and like by this point you already had one of the boys?
Yeah, no, the
second one on the way?
When I went full time, our second son was like 3 months old when I went full.
How did you find the courage to go for it?
I'll be honest with you, it's negligent. And I say that partly joking, partly serious. It is negligent to go into comedy 3 months after go full time, and it was a bad decision, like to do it then, because we were like broke, and I wasn't making enough money from comedy, and we were really struggling, and it was really stressful on Lisa. And it's such a non-noble thing to cause stress. I'm saying to Lisa, I did have a steady job, you're right, and have walked away from it to chase this dream, you're right.
But I've got a 10 at the Nottingham Glee, so I think it's worth it.
And I think I might get asked back to do a weekend. Do you know, like that? All of that is like was really difficult. In terms of like the courage, the truth is, if I'm being absolutely honest, I knew that teaching was a bit of a safety net, because I felt like I've got this career to go back to. And so let me just give comedy a go. And if it doesn't go well, I can always go back to teaching. For a certain time, I certainly couldn't go back to teaching now. I've said too many things that would ban me from education. But I feel like at that time, that's what I thought. And I came really close to quitting on a number of occasions. I came really close. I had like... I've talked about this before, but when I was on my way to do the Leicester Mercury Comedian of the Year,
which is it's a competition for new acts that you get sort of put up by someone in the industry.
Promoters have to nominate you, and for that reason, it's got this sort of a level of prestige to it because of the people that have won it in the past.
I've lost it.
Yeah, Josh Widdecombe won it one year. I think Jason Manford won it one year. But I'd done a gig somewhere up north, and then I was going to Leicester to do that competition, and I phoned Lisa, and I remember I was at a train station, and I phoned Lisa and I said, I think I'm done with this. I'm not making any money. Like, I don't know, like this is really a big struggle. And she said to me, just go to Leicester, do the competition, and come back and we can have a chat about it. And so I went and did the competition, and I honestly think that because I sort of thought this might be the beginning of me winding this up, I won the competition. But I did win, but I feel like it's because I didn't feel any pressure. I didn't feel any nerves or anything, because I just thought, if this goes badly, I'm just going to go back to teaching. And also there's nothing riding on it for me. I just sort of thought, this comedy's not paying the bills, and so... And then winning the competition, like obviously you win a bit of money, but that certainly isn't enough money to pay the bills that I had outstanding. But it was like a validation. I do think if I hadn't won the Leicester Mercury that night, I probably wouldn't be doing comedy now.
That's mad.
Yeah, but that is honestly the truth.
Do you think?
Yeah, I'm like 95% sure that I would have made the decision to be like, because I was going into it going, this is not working out. And so then...
And how was your self-worth at that? Like, how did you just get up on stage and think, I don't care what these people think of me because I'm out of here?
No, I wasn't that anaesthetised, because you do it's horrible to die on your ass, isn't it? Like, regardless of how much you convince yourself I don't care, it still feels horrific. So But I was like, I had a great night because I just was like, I was watching the other people in the competition enjoying their stuff in a way that I wouldn't be if I was really like if I was really nervous about winning. I was just having fun with it. Was just like a nice night, and I just didn't feel any pressure. I just went on and thought, let's just see how this goes.
And did you have any moments after that where you thought, I might jack this in?
Probably. But I think most of that is like, to me, that was a significant moment. Like after that, you do have moments where you go, this isn't going how I wanted it to. You get rejection and stuff like that. Like I remember I was involved. The BBC were looking for a topical show. And so they put out this brief to all production companies, like, we're looking for this topical comedy show. And it got down to the final 3, and I hosted 2 of them. And the one that I didn't host got commissioned, which was the MASH report. And I remember finding out about that on the way to being one of the hosts of Comic Relief. Like, Flo phoned me up, our agent, and said, I can't believe I'm saying this, but they've rejected both the pilots that you're in. And that sounds like that is the epitome of first world problem. Mm-hmm. But at the time, it felt like, oh, I'm not good. I'm just not good. That's just not something that's going to be in my, I couldn't help feeling a sense of rejection.
Yeah,
there was the truth is I was doing fine. It wasn't like I was going to be broke or anything, like everything was all right. But it's like you put so much of yourself into these things and you allow yourself to get excited about something. And then it was like we were joking about it. Like, how funny would it be if none of the stuff that you were doing was like,
and how funny was it?
Not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. It made me I found it very difficult to care about charity later on that night. But the truth is like, that is, the thing is I think that's one of the lessons in, that was the right thing to happen, because the MASH report was a brilliant show. And like, it was the best. When I think about the 2 pilots and I think about the MASH report is the one that should have got commissioned. And then the BBC said to me, we do like you, we just didn't think those shows were for you, or showcase you properly. And then I ended up, off the back of that, we came up with the Ranganation. I ended up hosting that for like however many series. Now, I'm not saying, that sounds very like it worked out in the end, but even if I hadn't got the Ranganation, I still think commissioning the MASH report was the right decision. And I just feel like we don't know what the path is supposed to be. And so you can convince yourself that it has to be this, this and this, but it doesn't. And I think that's the mistake. That's the cause of a lot of anxiety for people like you and I, is that we think that this is the opportunity, or we think that this is the route it has to take. And it just doesn't. We're not preordained to have this special path. And the sooner you accept that, the sooner life becomes a bit easier to sort of stomach,
And how do you deal with rejection? Because I know that, regardless of what stage you get to of your career, there's still stuff that you want to happen that then doesn't go in the direction that you want it to. Yeah. How are you dealing with that now? Now,
I sometimes get frustrated with the way it happens. Like, you and I both know there are times when you are sort of assured something is going to go a certain way, and then the rug gets pulled out from underneath you. That is like, it feels like you get gut punches still. But I'm now much better at thinking, it probably wasn't. If somebody says they don't think this thing is a good idea, they're probably right. I mean, I feel like if they say this show isn't right for us, they know better than I do. Or if this opportunity doesn't come off. There's been times when I've been down to the last 2 or 3 for like an acting role, and then I've seen the person that's got it, and I've gone, correct. Like, they're much better for this than I would have been. And so you sort of go, I just think it's all part of it, and I feel like it's that same thing of like how you learn more from bad gigs than you do from good ones. I feel like if you go to do something, me hosting those 2 pilots that didn't go anywhere, that was still good experience. And then the next time something like that came around, I was better equipped to do it. And so I feel like there's something to take from all of those experiences. So now, am I completely unaffected by rejection? No. But I'm much better at dealing with it than I used to be.
And is it just because of like a radical acceptance of highs, lows, just learning how to ride them?
The thing is, I sort of feel like My answer that I'd love to give you is that I've just become a lot better at dealing with it. And what you just said, that I'm just so good at handling the highs and lows of life. But the truth is, I think it's just sort of, I just sort of think I've been really lucky. I can't, it would be unfair of me to start getting annoyed about stuff that doesn't go my way. Like, you know, career-wise and in my personal life, things have gone way better for me than I deserve. And so if I started to like complain about things that weren't going my way, I think I'd be being greedy. And I already have been, really.
And going back to the sort of the title of this chapter, which is it all about the climb? Now, do you look back on those, like we did our first tour together in 2011, 2012? No, 14
2014,
maybe.
It was 2014.
And do you, like, because I think at the time I was very anxious, as I'm sure you'll remember.
Yeah, I remember.
I was going through a really anxious state when we were on the road together. But now I look back at that time sort of quite romantically.
Yeah.
You know, and like in really rose-tinted lenses. Do you now appreciate the sort of the journey to get to where you are now?
Yeah.
Like, do you appreciate that moment standing on a platform ringing Lisa and saying, I'm going to jack it in?
Yeah, I think like when you have those experiences, it makes you appreciate the other stuff. One of my favourite experiences ever in comedy was when you and I were doing the Fairfield Halls and in Croydon, and it was a 500-seater, and we were both panicking because we were just like, we've got no business being in a 500-seater. We were on the phone to Flo going, you need to pay for this, like offer free tickets to everybody. I think Roy Chubby Brown might have been on in the big room.
He was in the room next door, that's right.
Yeah.
Because we kept laughing because if he saw me and you being like, a lesbian?
Yeah. I remember like doing some crap opener about they've gone double Chubby Brown at this venue. but
oh God, that's bad.
But like that to me was like, I look back at those things now. I remember like I had an experience where I was testing out when like comedians' websites were a big deal. I tested out this thing where I asked a question on the website and I said, if you answer this correctly, you can get 2 free tickets to my work in progress. And somebody I used to teach answered the question. So I sorted him out the 2 free tickets. Him and his mate were the only 2 people that turned up to the work in progress. I had to go out into the venue and go, I don't think we're going to go ahead.
Do you remember when we turned up in Brighton that time? We went to Brighton. I don't remember what that gig, what
3 and 10.
The 3 and 10?
Yeah.
We were doing a work in progress together.
And
not one person turned up.
Not a single person turned up.
That must have been 2011.
Something like that, yeah. That was bad.
Not one person.
It was a real low point for both of us. And
but now I sort of love it.
I know.
Like, it's really funny now.
I know. And
but it's the fullness of time, isn't it? That's the thing with all of these dips in the road. In the fullness of time, you can, even if they're not funny, you know, but you can sort of see things through a different lens.
Well, I think one of the problems with, like, you take you, for example, right? Like, if you'd have said, you're going to be recording your audiobook for your book that you're bringing out. If you'd have said that to Suzi a few years ago, I don't know how long ago, but you would have been like, God, that'd be amazing. I can't even imagine that, right? And one of the problems with one of the great things about our job is that the goalposts constantly shift. So when I started comedy, all I wanted to do was get paid to do 20 minutes on stage, right? And then as soon as you're doing that regularly, you start to go, what's the next thing? And then you're like, oh, I want to go on tour. And then you go on tour and you go, oh, I'd love to do bigger rooms than this. And then you do bigger rooms. You go, I'd love to do bigger rooms than this. And then I'd love to do TV. So what happens is you keep readjusting what success looks like to you. And so when you have those moments of failure, I think they're really useful to look back on and go, you know, that cliche about smelling the roses. I think if you don't think about where you've come from, it makes it more difficult to appreciate where you're at now. And I think like both of us are in positions that we wouldn't, career-wise and home-wise, are not in positions that we couldn't have dreamt of a while ago. And I think it's worth reflecting on that. You know, when things are getting really crap and you're like, why isn't this coming off for me? Or why am I not taking the next step to doing this or whatever?
Or why doesn't that person want to go out with me?
Yes,
you know, whatever
exactly,
the thing is.
Yeah. Why does she keep doing so many personal training sessions? You know, stuff like that. Like I think looking back at those moments when it felt tough, I think it's all part of it. I think it's really good.
And my final question, and then we can go for lunch.
Great.
Which is the real reason that
Yeah,
you're
which is
here.
the real dream, to be honest with you.
What advice would you give to someone who is listening to this right now and is maybe in one of those slumps that you just spoke about? Because it's great for us to talk about it now and for us to look back at those moments and go, in time we appreciated that, or it taught us a lesson, or it made us appreciate the highs. What, in those moments where you've felt anxiety, or in those moments where you've felt a disappointment or a low in either your career or your personal life, how do you sort of hang tight and sort of push through?
It's a great question. I think that the thing is, I'm loath to give this advice because it's very difficult to do it in the moment. But the truth is whatever you're going through now is going to be something you look back on and sort of talk about in the same way that we're talking about it now. Whatever is happening, whatever failure you're going through, whatever difficult you're going through, is going to be something that in a few months or in a few years, you're going to be talking about as being one of your formative experiences that have got you to where you are now. And one of the things that I think is one of the biggest problems that I think we have in sort of trying to achieve contentment or whatever is that I just feel like we're so results orientated, and like we're like, I want to win this award, I want to get this number of sales, or I want to be on this channel, or I want to be doing all of those things are outside of your control. That you have some control over those, but there are too many variables that are outside of your control for you to put your happiness on them. What you can control is what you're creating and what you're doing and how you conduct yourself. And if you place your happiness and your contentment in getting those things right, then your chances of being happy and content are much higher. If you pin it on something that's an external variable, one of two things will happen. One, you won't get it and you feel gutted, or two, you will get it and it doesn't fill the hole that you thought it would. That is the truth of it. And I feel like if you can focus on the things that you can be in control of, your chances of being content are much higher.
That's great. Thank you, Ron.
Thanks, Suzi.